Hello, Baker International Finance students. Hope everyone is having a great Memorial Day weekend. So we wrap up our last week, week 7, next week. So I'm going to post the video lecture just a little bit early, allow me to do some other things this weekend. But just make sure you wrap up everything from week 6 before Sunday at midnight. And then for the final week, you pretty much just have the homework assignment, which is pretty brief, and then your final project with the PowerPoint. So in doing the PowerPoint, um, go back and look at all those bullet points in the syllabus, because that's what I'm going to be looking for that you addressed in the PowerPoint. So, well, the last 2 chapters this week, we're going to deal with the tax management for international or multinational enterprises and also international trade financing. To start off with the tax management piece, again, the tax rates have changed significantly in the United States since this book was last published. Under the Trump administration, it was one of the big pushes, and it's still highly debated and contested. But most of the corporate tax rates went to 21%, where it used to be kind of a gradually increasing scale, and we were often viewed in kind of the world's perspective that our corporate tax rates were too high and it didn't make us competitive, and it was causing some of these other strategies that you'll read about in the textbook, where firms were deciding to locate in Ireland and other places to minimize their tax liability. So, of course, the trade-off is you have to make up that money somewhere else, and especially during the COVID-19 crisis, when we're really pushing the levels of governmental debt. As long as somebody's willing to purchase that debt, we can still finance things, but at some point, there's probably going to be some trade-offs and cutbacks in other areas, and that's just the unknown right now. But obviously Medicaid and Social Security is 2 of the biggest ones. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out in the long run. As long as if you have these lower taxes and you're not recouping them in some way, then it just means that somebody in the future is going to have to reduce their income, whether it's Social Security or you have to wait longer till you retire. But well, we will have to make some tough decisions in the future. So, but hopefully the economy will rebound. We've got some positive news from the markets this past week. So a little bit of reopening in the United States, but still there's that concern and caution about how quickly they reopen and the impact to our health. So, all right. So for the tax management, chapter 15. Obviously, the goal for multinational enterprises is to reduce the tax burden. The textbook talks about tax morality, the ethical, the right thing to do, and tax neutrality. The goal should still be to try to make decisions based on economic decisions, not based on where the tax rates are. If I can still make a profit in that region and it meets my objectives and net present value and total rate of return, I should still make that decision. But you are competing against other firms, and does that host country that you're going into have competitors that give advantages? So it is a good decision to invest in those areas. But in looking at the 2 tax systems you're going to read about, you're going to look at the worldwide approach. It says taxes are levied in firms in the host country regardless where the income was earned, and the territorial approach, where income earned in that particular country. So and then with some remaining topics in that chapter, based on my notes, they're going to talk about the different tax types. The direct, those apply to personal income, corporate income taxes. Then you have the indirect things such as value-added taxes in the production process, consumption tax, excise tax. A lot of us think of those like sales tax. Even when I go out to eat today, it just amazes me where I live in Lee Summit. It's almost like approaching 10%. And at some point, you kind of have to ask the question, that does it impact your behavior? And that's that idea going back to tax neutrality. If taxes get too high, how much can the consumer bear? How much can the producer bear in that cost? But you want to try to, as a government, try to maximize those revenues and make sure you're putting them towards good public goods. With multinational tax management, obviously the goal is try to maximize the earning per share. I think you've heard me say before the analogy I like to use of the soup and the spoons can mean the shareholders, but trying to reduce that tax liability for all those spoons so they can give back as much soup to those spoons as possible. But general, tax avoidance, I don't have a problem with tax avoidance. You're following the tax rules. You're trying to lower the tax liability for your shareholders. It's the tax evasion. Tax evasion bad, tax avoidance good. So tax evasion, you might end up going to jail. So you got to be really careful about that. But a lot of this talks about the strategies that the firms use, and that could be allocation of debt, transfer pricing, foreign tax credits, cross-crediting, and they mentioned briefly the check-the-box approach and some of the changes in the tax reforms. And just to go over some of those examples, allocation of debt. For those countries that allow interest to be deducted on debt, you may allocate debt to those particular areas. Foreign tax credits, ways to try to avoid double taxation, just as we as individuals get tax credit. Actually, the stimulus bill that we received, if you received one, or the payment, really was just a tax credit for the 2020 tax year. So you're just getting it ahead of time, as opposed to when you file your taxes. But companies can make the same decisions about that too. The big one too I want to talk about is the transfer pricing. And this can be somewhat controversial, and the textbook talked about it. Does it impede on incentives or trying to make decisions, or would somebody lack a bonus because it doesn't look as profitable in another area? But essentially what you're doing, they walk through a really good example on page 419 of the textbook about how I can increase the cost of goods to another area to lower that tax liability. But of course, when you're doing these things, and you're just like the IRS in the United States, you need to be prepared to justify or provide consistency in the way that you're doing things. Um, Taxing agencies are going to see through these things, so you just have to be consistent and be prepared to justify how you're doing these things. So, okay. Last, just want to talk a little bit about the international trade financing. How international trade exports and imports are financed from this part. Obviously, there's currency risk and risk of competition. But the three main documents they're going to talk about this chapter were the letter of credit, kind of a bank's promise to pay, the draft, think of that bill, and the bill of lading, like the title. So this is really critical to financing, just kind of having that middle party that's willing to take on some of that risk. So they walk through a really good example in the textbook that I want you to read through about how this process works. But it reduces the risk, for both the exporter and the importer, to making sure that payment is made, goods are delivered, documentation is in place. But with this too, they had mentioned too that some of these can turn into baker's acceptances, which can be traded and as an investment interest. But some of the other alternative trade financing methods, as I mentioned with the banking acceptance, there could be trade acceptances, factoring, which can be really costly. You're doing this at extreme cost, but these are usually for firms that are strapped for cash and in desperate need of cash, so they're willing to kind of factor those receivables and the potential for securitizations. And the last part they mentioned with the forfeiting, could be a process where you're financing very short, medium, long term, but you're making a series of payments over a period of time based upon some type of agreement or trade agreements, or I should say credit agreements. So, well, that was what I wanted to wrap up for this week. But I want to say I really enjoyed working with our cohort. We had a small, tight cohort for this class, and that may be the future too. For a lot of these cohorts that we have in the future. I'm kind of interested to see how this plays out in higher ed over the next couple of years. But I want to say I wish all of you well in your careers. Hopefully you've gathered and picked up some additional skills from this course and the way you think about and approach multinational enterprises, international finance, whatever aspects of your careers that it touches you with that aspects. I remember when I was at Sprint, I used to do a lot of this work with international trades and doing letters of credit and bankers acceptances. But anyway, hopefully, you guys will see some better prospects too after we come out of this whole mess. I know the job market right now looks a little scary, but things will improve in the long run. So, it's still what you're doing now. You're getting a valuable education. You're learning a lot, and that's going to be help you make better decisions in the future. So, thanks again. Enjoyed working with you all, and should everything wrapped up shortly after everything is submitted, so I plan to get grades in probably like a day or two after that Sunday we wrap up. But otherwise, have a great summer, and hopefully maybe I'll see you at a future graduation if I'm able to make out, and we'll talk to you then. Take care.